Hi, this is Robin, and this is the first of a two-part set of videos on how to create unique black and white image styles in Photoshop. And in Photoshop, you can create all sorts of photographic looks and styles. And the whole reason for doing that is to convey different moods or help you establish your signature style. In other words, your distinctive, recognizable way that you produce photographic outputs. And this video workshop is going to focus on creating two creative black and white Photoshop processing approaches or styles, depending on how you want to describe it. And they are minimalist and infrared. So that's what's going to be in this part one, is minimalist and infrared. In part two, which will be a separate video, I'll cover how to create low-key and high-key looks. Now, at the start of each demo for each of these two parts, I will define the look, mention some of the photo capture considerations that you might want to keep in mind, and then walk through the steps to create that style or look in Photoshop. In all cases, I'll start with color photos and convert them to black and white. You have the option, I'm not going to get into it too much in this video, of after you've created your black and white outputs to create them as other color monochromes if you want, using either color lookup tables or photo filters or other approaches in Photoshop. So below the video, what I'll do is I'll include links to the other videos on my channel that demonstrate other approaches to convert images to black and white, as well as video that I did on how to use color lookup tables for color grading. So if you want to go on and further modify some of these looks, you can do that too. I'll also do what I always do, which is provide the links to the start times for each of the demos in this video, in case you want to hop around or just view a specific demo if you come back to review the steps. So for your convenience, I will include those start times below in the description below the video. Now, one last housekeeping thing. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, it is free. It's sort of like a following versus a real subscription. Just click the subscribe button and the black bell icon below this video, and YouTube will send you a single alert whenever I release new content. I don't email anyone, and if you've already subscribed, you're all set. You don't have to do anything. So let me just start jumping into demo number one. And in this first video, I'm going to describe and step through how to achieve a minimalist black and white photo look. So this is going to be the image I use for demo number one. It's a seascape. As you can see, here's a person standing by the ocean, all bundled up in a coat, looking out with this fence in the foreground. So as I said, I'm going to describe the look that I'm going for with each of these demos before I dive into the demo. So what makes a minimalist image? So a minimalist image is an image that's stripped down to only its essential elements. So there are simple lines, usually clean geometric shapes, lots of empty or what we refer to as negative space. Usually there's lots of white because, again, it's a monochrome in black and white. Another word for a minimalist image is a very stark image. It almost has an abstract quality. And what you want to do is focus the viewer's attention on just the key elements in the scene. Now, even though I'm talking about black and white, you certainly can include shades of gray in a minimalist monochrome or black and white image. It does not have to be just purely black and white. Now, as I also said in the introduction, starting images are best for a minimalist look if your shot has distinct shapes. So feel free to remove details from your scene in Photoshop. You don't have to be a purist in this kind of look. It's not documentary. So take out any excess details that you think are going to be distracting, both when shooting and when you get into Photoshop. Try to control what gets into the scene. Strong shadows, spatial isolation, repetition of shapes, leading lines are all good things to look for as subject matter or content in an image if you want to create a minimalist look. Usually, I would say that for minimalist looks, they tend to be quiet. I'm putting that in air quotes versus active or chaotic scenes. So, for instance, this shot I have right here of this ocean is what I would call quiet. It's not a busy urban street scene, for instance. And I'd say that the best light to shoot in with the idea of making a black and white minimalist image is very high contrast because it'll make it easier for you to strip out all the other distractions. Okay, so with that background of the definition of minimalist and the kinds of things to think about when you're shooting for a minimalist image, now let's get into the demo. So as I said, I've got this seascape image here. It is a stock image from Unsplash, and here is the person who shot it. You should have your background image opened into your layers panel in Photoshop. I always suggest that you duplicate and work on a copy versus the background. So you can drag this to the bottom of the layers panel to the new layer icon, which is that box with the plus, and you get a duplicate copy that you can start working on. Now, I want to be working with the gradient map adjustment layer. So what I suggest, since we're going to be working with this as a black and white image, is make sure your foreground in your color picker is black and your background color is white. Come to the bottom of your layers panel to the circle with the line through it, which is the add new adjustment layer. And we're going to come down to where it says gradient map and click on that. And we now have a new gradient map adjustment layer in our layer stack, okay? So now what I'm going to do is click on the thumbnail for that just to be sure that we have that active. So with that gradient map layer active, we want to come to the properties panel for that layer and look at the color gradient bar that's here. And what I want to do and what you want to do is just one single left click on that to open it up. And so now we have the gradient editor open that we can work with for this black to white gradient, okay? So what we want to do is drag these color stop handles. So this handle at the left is the black color stop. This is the white color stop. And what we want to do is start dragging them to minimalize this black and now newly converted to black and white image to a much more minimal, a lot fewer details kind of look. So I'm going to start with the black and just start dragging this to the right. So this should add more black to the image as I drag this to the right. And I release it every once in a while just to see what's happening, since as I'm dragging, it's not real-time view. So you can see if you look at my image versus, say, I would say don't worry about the numbers I'm going for because it won't be a formula. You have to look for your image and see what suits your image. So you can watch my image and I will tell you where I'm going with regard to what I'm working with here. Okay, so I'm going to leave that here for now because I can always readjust that color stop. So I pulled that color stop, the black one, and darkened up this image significantly from how it started. Now you will notice if you look here on this gradient bar that after I started working with that color stop, a new little diamond appeared here, and I don't know why they make this so teensy tiny, but that is a mid-tone color. So we have blacks now, mid-tones, and whites that we can adjust. So let me start pulling this white in and see what happens with that as we try to add more white to the image, since I made that quite a bit darker. And I'm only going to do a little bit just till I see what happens here. Okay, so you can see if you watched the image, it did get brighter from where it had been. So we're moving in the right direction. So now if I can grab this tiny little diamond here and see which way we want to do this. Maybe put some more white in here because that water did get very black. I can go a little bit more white in here. I don't want to totally blow out the waves for my image, so that's what I am keeping an eye on. So for your image, again, be conscious of details you don't want to lose because they help tell your visual story, but you do want to get this down to as minimal a look as possible. So I would say for now, for purposes of the demo, since you're not going to work with this exact same image, I'm going to stop here this way for mine. So after you have pulled your color stops to where you've made a more stark black and white or monochrome image, then I would say click the OK button here at the top where you can see my highlighter is of the gradient editor to accept that. So now we have our gradient map layer ready to go. Now, something else I want to try, and this is optional, so you can try it with your image too if you think it needs it. I'm wondering if I can add or refine a little bit of the tones in this by adding a levels layer. So I'm going to try it and see. It may or may not help for this specific image, but I want you to be aware of it as something you can try for yours. So again, bottom of the layers panel, come down to the add new adjustment layer icon, that circle with the line, come down to where it says levels and left click, and now we have a levels adjustment layer. So again, I'm going to click on the thumbnail for the levels, and in the properties panel for that active layer, you see we now have the levels histogram here. So I want to see if I can maybe open up some of the darks a little bit. So that means I'm going to start with the mid-tone sliders here because I don't need to make this darker. If anything, I'll just see if I want to make it a little lighter. So I'm going to grab the mid-tone slider in the middle, and I'm going to pull it a little bit left. And see, yeah, see that's getting a little bit brighter. So I'll see if I want to stick with this or not. But I'm also, again, watching the water. So let me leave that there for now and then see if there's anything else I want to do with the whites. Let me see here. All right, so it might have done a little bit. I don't know. So that did sort of brighten things up a lot, but now I do think I'll see if there is something I can bring back with the black. So I'm going to bring the black's transformation handle up. It becomes a balancing act, really. So you can see, right, and that did make it a little darker again. So let me now go back to the midtones and see if I want to adjust that anymore. All right, I'm going to leave mine there for now, and we'll see how that goes. So anyway, so I've added some refinement to the initial gradient map with the levels layer, and as I said, you can decide whether yours needs it or not. Now, the one thing that you can see here, and I want to point this out, is that there are way too many details here in the foreground. So this takes away from it being a minimalist kind of an image. So what I want to do is, using my lasso tool, which is on the toolbar, so my toolbar is docked right here, so everything is convenient on the right side. The lasso tool is this little thing that looks like a lasso. Make sure that it has the black behind it to say it's active if you want to select an area of your image. And I'm just going to, well, maybe an easier way to do it, tell you what, I'm going to use the object selection tool instead. The tool right below it here, the square with the arrow into it. I think it'll grab it and it'll work faster. So I am just going to trace loosely around this foreground sand area. So hopefully it'll make a selection of just that sand. Let me just scout here. Yeah, that has all these distractions in it. And what I want to do now is with that selection active, so we have the marching ants active, again, bottom of the layers panel, come to the new adjustment layer icon, click on that, and I think I'm going to work with curves. Okay, so now you can see, let me just show you the mask on the curves layer. So we have selected that. And with that mask active, and you know it's active if there's a white frame around it, I want to come to the properties panel for that layer and just soften up the edge on that a little bit so it's a little forgiving. Once I get that done, I'm going to just go back to my neutral tool here. Click on the thumbnail for curves so that in the properties panel you see the curve and the histogram. What I want to do is, because I want to make this whiter and I want to reduce some of these blacks, I want to do what they call lift the blacks. So I'm going to my black transform angle here on the curve. And if you can see on the curve, it's black at the bottom. And as you go up, it becomes more white. So that's when I want to lift this up and start making the blacks hazier and more shadowy. I don't want to entirely remove them because I want to leave a hint of what that is there, but I don't want it that dark. So I am going to start clicking on this button here and just start pulling this up the y-axis. And now you can watch my image, and I'm watching my image to see when I have sort of a hint of some texture and what's going on there, but not too dark or not too distracting for a minimalist image. I think that to me looks pretty good. Maybe a hint more. Okay, so there's just a hint of some texture there, and you can obviously for yours, if you want to, if there's something there and you want to go completely white with it, feel free to do so. I just, like it the way it is like this for mine. So you just decide for yours how stark and how minimalist you want your image to be and what hints of details, and then you can use curves as I just did to reduce the details, or you can even go in there and selectively, if you create a new layer, use your remove tool and take out some of the excess details, but I'm not going to do that right now. Okay. All right, so now I want to create a stamp layer before I go on for here. So I am going to click bottom of the layers panel on the add new layer icon, which is that box with the plus. I get the new transparent empty layer. I want to make a stamp layer here. And a stamp layer, if you've heard my other videos, is essentially, it's a composite of everything that's come before that gets stamped onto a single layer. So it almost looks like you're starting out from a new revised background layer, but you don't collapse all the work you've done. So to create a stamp layer, you simultaneously press and hold, Shift, Control, Command, Alt or Option, and E. And there you can see we've now got that image all put together there. Okay, so now what I want to do is the same thing for the sandy area behind this fence that I just did in the foreground. I want to get rid of some of all this distraction of details because there's just still too much going on here for a minimalist image. But I'm not going to do what I just did because this is going to be a little trickier with this fence here. So you could do the same thing in other parts of your image as I just did here with the object selection or any of the other selection tools. But if you have something like this where there's texture or shapes, breaking it up, you need to try a different kind of tool. So I am going to go up to the top of the interface to see where I'm up here in the select menu. And I'm going to come down to where it says color range, okay, and click on that. And you get this box that pops up that gives you access to the color range. And you have this little box here that shows you what you're going to see. I keep mine set to grayscale, and I always want, for mine, I want to create a selection, so I make sure that that's activated. And you have a fuzziness slider and a range slider. And the fuzziness you can pull to the right if you want your selection to pick up more of the highlights or brights or lightness or luminosity ranges in your image. So we're going to work with these little eyedropper tools right here. So I'll start with this one on the far left, which is the general one. And for mine, I'm just going to start clicking in this area, and now I'm going to use the plus because I want to add to that. So I am trying to select the whites that are in that area behind the fence. Since I want to add to it, I'm going to click on the eyedropper with the little plus icon. If you get too much, you can use the minus. So I'm going to just keep clicking in this sandy area here to have Photoshop pick up as much of that area as I can to create a selection of it. And you can see it would be harder. I can also do the inverse, I suppose, and click on the blacks. So for yours, just keep in mind, whatever you're clicking on, keep it consistent. And again, I'm trying to avoid the dirt or the black spots in the sand because I'm trying to sample the white sand and create a selection of that. And I may be less than perfectionist here just to keep things moving. So spend as much time as you need to spend on yours to get a good selection. Okay. And then, as I said, you can adjust the fuzziness slider over here. I'm back here in the color range adjustment box to say how much or how little. See, you can see if I pull that to the left, less of these other excess areas are picked up. So I'm going to stay with that. And once you get your selected area mostly good, you're never going to get it perfect probably, then click OK to accept that. And now you can see all the marching ants in here. And I have a selection made of that area and some other areas that's surrounding it. So I want to do the same thing I just did on the foreground. Bottom of the layers panel, come down to the add new adjustment layer icon, and we're going to add a curves layer again. And let me just show you. So that's how that picked up what we were doing. Now, I just pressed Alt, or you've pressed Option if you're on a Mac, to reveal what's on the mask. And I want to leave it revealed for a moment because I want to modify it since this picked up more than I wanted it to. So in the toolbar, I'm going to come to the brush tool, click on that. It looks like a paintbrush. Making sure that the black is your foreground color, I'm going to paint away some of the areas I don't want to be part of the mask. So the green is my highlighter, the white circle is my brush. So I'm going to use my left bracket key to make my brush smaller. And now I'm just going to start painting anything away here that I want to be blocked from being affected by curves. That's white right now. Okay. So I want to keep that line of seaweed or whatever the person is standing on there as a defining line for my minimalist image. But I want to be able to control what happens in this kind of messy, dirty, sandy area. And again, now I don't want anything more to happen to this area that we already reduced the details on and made stark, more stark in the foreground. So I'm making that black. So Photoshop, the mask on that layer will not, on that curves layer, will not do anything else. And if this is blending or bleeding too much into another area, you can make your brush harder too. I'm just not going to worry about it too much here for demo purposes. So I'm going to call that good enough. So I have isolated the areas in white here are the ones that I want to be affected by my curves layer. So I'll press Alt or Option, depending on the machine, and left click on that mask, and then left click on the thumbnail for that curves layer. Okay. So now I want to do the same kind of thing I did before. I want to come down to the properties or up to the properties, wherever yours is, for that curves layer that's active. Go to the properties, and again, I'm going to try to lift the blacks and see if I can get rid of some more of those details in that mid-ground sandy area. You can watch the image and we can see together if we're able to reduce some of that detail. Yes, we're getting rid of some of it. I'm going to stay there. And then the things that are black, I'd like to be more stark. So going up lifts the black. Going to the right a bit on the x-axis crushes the black, and it'll make it a little bit more intense. and make it just a little bit more stark. So I think I will stay there for now. Okay, so now let's see what we've done. And again, let me make a stamp layer. So again, new empty layer by clicking on the Add New Layer icon, Shift, Control, Command, Alt, Option, and E all together to make a stamp layer. Okay, and let me just put this back to my neutral tool so I know where I am for the demos here. And we can just look at a before and after, and you can see it's made it a lot more minimalist than it was to begin with. And as I said, let me just do something else here. So if I add a new empty layer with that Add New Layer icon, come down the toolbar and let me just grab the Remove tool. You can see if you want to, and I'm going to make this smaller with the bracket key, you can get rid of some of these different areas that here that might be too much. Okay. Oops, I'm on the wrong tool. That would help. Okay, so you can see that you can get rid of some of the details if there's still too much in there for your taste. If this something like this is still in yours, you can remove it. Okay, but I think we've ended up with a lot more stark, minimalist kind of an image. And this is, I'll label it, so if you're looking at this, this is the Remove tool I used just to do some touch-ups. And I find I like to work with it on an empty layer. I find it works better. So again, we've gone from this to this. So that's how you get to your minimalist type of an image from a starting color image. Now, I mentioned in the introduction that optionally you can color grade too. So again, that has nothing to do with creating a minimalist image. But let me just show you for something like this. I'm not going to do it for all the demos. And again, maybe I'll just do another stamp layer just so we have a nice starting point. So if it reinforces your story to add a touch of monochrome color, so in other words, a single color to your monochrome image, you can do so. This is an ocean scene. When I think of oceans, I think of blue. This person is clearly all bundled up in a heavy coat. So I think of cold weather, also blue or cool colors. So if I want to add a color grade, well, a single color to this to keep it a monochrome, bottom of the layers panel, go to the circle with the line through it, come down to where it says color lookup, and that's where you can work with what they call LUTs or lookup tables. And click on that, and we've added a color lookup layer to the top of the layer stack. And again, this is all optional. You don't have to do this. In the properties panel for that layer, if you do want to single color grade, come across from where it says 3D LUT file to where it says load 3D LUT. Click on that little arrow, and then you'll get a list. You may not have as many as I have, but I've done a lot of custom ones and added others too. And I'm just going to look for a blue. Let me try this one. There we go. So you can see how it is added. If you look at the image, I'll turn it off back to how it was, black and white. And so if you think, for yours, that's going to add to the story to have a slight single color grade to the monochrome image, then you can do that as a final extra step for your minimalist photo. But we have created what I would consider a minimalist image here. You can go even more minimal and more stark than this, like a single tree with maybe a fence leading out to that tree in the distance. But I think you get the idea of how you can remove details. And then for yours, as I said, you can make it as stark as you would like for it to be. So that is the end of demo number 1 on the kinds of steps and tools in Photoshop to use to convert a color image to a minimalist black and white or monochrome image. So let me close this out and go to demo number 2. Okay. In this demo, and this is demo number 2 here, and let me make some more space because this is a pretty good sized panoramic style image here. So this is demo number 2, and in demo number 2, I'm going to show you how to create a black and white infrared photo look with your images, starting with a color image. And as you can see, I've got this autumn trees image, and again, it's a stock image. This one I grabbed from Adobe Stock. So as I said, I'm going to define what the look is and some good tips for what to look for if you're shooting your own images, and then we'll go into the demo of how to convert this to an infrared. So what makes an infrared image? So an infrared image typically often has a dreamy kind of a look or a quality to it. It's often used, and that's why I picked a landscape here, with landscapes, sometimes with portraits too. And the infrared effect tends to turn vegetation, which is why I picked something with a lot of leaves and grass and stuff like that, to white. So infrared will make anything vegetative looking white, and ditto for skin. So if you're working with a portrait and you want to go for a very stark white, maybe high fashion look, this approach might be an interesting look for you to try with a portrait too. With infrared, the water in a scene tends to get very black or dark, and the skies get very dark. So again, it's typically a very high contrast look, but it still can include or should include a full spectrum of tones. So at least that's how I like to do mine. Now, as far as capturing and the kind of starting photos or pictures that you might want to work with, this is the one time when it would be really great to shoot in the harsh light of a midday sun, because you want more harsh light. You certainly can shoot with an infrared modified camera or with IR filters, but my demo is intended to show you how to convert a normal, in quotes, color photo to achieve the infrared look. So you don't have to go to the expense of converting a camera or buying infrared filters. You can still get an infrared look. Okay, so with that background, let me get started on showing you the steps and the demo of how to convert this to an infrared look. So again, you've got your background image opened in the layers panel. You can either drag it to the bottom of the layers panel to the add new layer icon, or click Control or Command and J, and that will jump up a duplicate background layer for you. Now this time I'm going to work to convert this with a black and white adjustment layer. So let's come to the bottom of the layers panel to the add new adjustment layer icon and come down to where it says black and white and click on that. Okay, so you can see just by doing that, it has converted this image to a black and white. And this is not a very good black and white because there's just no variety of tones. It's all kind of unitonal, as I like to call it. But so that wouldn't be good in any case. Whether you're doing infrared or not, you would need some differentiation of tones. But if you'll notice, when we click on this thumbnail to make sure that the black and white adjustment layer is active and look in the associated properties panel, the first thing we see when we come down here in the properties is preset. And if you come over across to this little down arrow and click on that, you see there's a variety of different presets that are available for the black and white adjustment layer. And lo and behold, there is an infrared preset. But I'm showing you this to show you that it's not very good, and that's why we're going to do this manually. So I'll just click on that. And I mean, this is just way overdone and awful to my taste. And all right, you can probably, if you want to try reducing the opacity and see if it works for yours, maybe you'll have a one-step wonder and it works really well. But I personally like to have more control over my images. So if you want to experiment with yours in that black and white adjustment layer, try the infrared preset and then try either different blend modes or lowering the opacity in the layers panel and see if that helps you. But I don't care for that, so I'm going to go back to the default and let's try doing our own manual settings. At least you'll know how to do it if you want to experiment and different images don't work as well as others. All right, so I'm going to just go right down the line of all these different color sliders. And as you can see at the end of each slider, the left is the darker end and the white is the brighter end. So I want to work with my reds and make them lighter. So I'm going to start pulling towards the right and watch the image. And let's see here. I release it from time to time so I can see what's going on. I tend to not want to go too extreme. If I want to tweak it, I just click in that box and then I hit the up or down arrows. All right, one more. And then also at the bottom of that properties panel, you can click on this eye and that'll let you see what colors you have so you can know which ones you need to adjust. Okay, so now let's try the yellows, and I can always go back and customize these. So again, green usually translates as a yellow in Photoshop, so I'm going to try to do a lot of my infrared white conversions with this yellow slider. So I'm going to go towards the right because I want to make it whiter or brighter or lighter. See, you can watch the image and see what's happening here. Oh, that's actually pretty good. So you can see I'm getting more gradations as I go versus that intense one-shot preset. So that's why I tend to like to work with the sliders. But as I said, try it and see what works for you. Let's try the greens next because we definitely have greens in the scene and they should be affected too to give you the infrared look. So watch the image as I'm pulling the greens towards the lighter end. It might have gone a little far. I'm blowing out some of these right here. All right, I'm going to click in there so I can control it because I'm overshooting where I like it. Then I can click one unit at a time. I'm going to leave that there. Okay, so next is the cyan, so that should affect some of the sky. And as I said, in infrared, the specs that I said are the greens, the whites go towards white, the water goes towards black, and the sky goes very dark. So we want to make the sky darker, so we're going to go towards the left end of the cyan slider. Yeah, the sky's getting darker, so that's a good sign. And it might got a little dark because I want to pull the, let me just leave it at 70 and then I'll see if I need to tweak them because the blues I want to go left also because there's certainly blue in that sky. So left towards the darker tones for the blues. That might be a little intense, but yeah. I'm going to leave that there for now. And then magenta, let's see, is there anything? So it might be reading some of this back here as magenta. So let me try the magenta and I'll go lighter with that because that would read as, so we can watch this area back in here that had the magentas and see if it changes. Certainly can't hurt. Okay, so now I've converted this to, this is it. Those were the steps. I've converted this to an infrared from a color image. So let's just before and after. So we've got our foliage converted to the whites, our water has gone black, and our sky is quite dark. So that's the infrared look. And as I said, for yours, if the preset works, it's even going to be an even faster kind of a thing. So that is it as far as converting to an infrared. But what I said right up front in the definition is that to me, infrared images, and especially if they were captured with a real infrared converted camera or an infrared filter, tend to have a glow. So let me show you some optional steps that you can do beyond just creating this infrared that's already gotten you where you want to be. So I'm going to create a stamp layer. Click on the Add New Layer icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. It'll give you an empty layer and then simultaneously press Shift, Control or Command, Alt or Option, and E. And that produces the stamp layer. So basically it's making a composite of everything that's below it. And let's see if we can add a glow to the infrared. So what I want to do is the same thing that I did to select the sand in the previous image. Going to go to the top of the Photoshop interface to select menu, come down to where it says color range, click on that, and now we're in the color range interface here. And what I want to do is select the highlights in this and see if I can make the highlights of the faux infrared glow. So the first thing that we see under color range in this pop-up box is select, and it says what you want to select. And before I used sampled colors. Let's just click on this little down arrow and try clicking on highlights, because that's the colors that are the infrared. And so now it has selected all of the colors that I have converted to white for purposes of an infrared look. So I'm just going to go with that. And you can adjust the fuzziness if you want. So let me see if there are more brights I want to pick up here. I'll just watch what happens with this mask as I go here. Oh, it is picking up a few more. All right, I'm going to leave it there. And I don't want to get too much, so let's see what the range does if I play with that. Yeah, that's constraining the range a little bit, so that's better. Yeah, I only want, you can, and again, there's no formula. I just drag the sliders till I see it affecting areas of the image that I want affected, because I really only want these, what I'm calling the faux infrared highlights, to glow. So now that I've got that, I'm going, as a selection, I'm going to click OK in this color range box. And again, you can see the marching ants. We've got all kinds of highlights of all the infrared section highlighted there. So now I'm going to do a Control or Command J with that selection active and jump them up onto their own layer. Let me see if I can turn these off so you can see. So can you see here, all those highlights are now sitting on their own transparent layer above the rest of the image. So I'll turn the rest of these eyes back on. And these are the select color highlights. Okay. Now, with that layer active, so the blue highlighting is on there, what I want to do is to basically add the glow on that. What I want to do is add a Gaussian blur. So I'm just going to blur those highlights a little bit. So top of the interface, to the filter menu, come down to where it says blur, go to the flyout to where it says Gaussian blur, left click on that. And now we have this Gaussian blur pop-up box. And you can determine by pulling this, and I always have mine set to preview so I can see what's happening. Depending on how far you pull this radius to the right, that's how much blur there's going to be. So I'm just going to start pulling this till I see, and I release it every once in a while to see when I'm getting, see, I can either watch the image and see it, watch, I'll put it back again and watch. You can see it's starting to glow, as I call it. So that's my faux glow for my faux infrared. And I'm going to leave it around there, I think. Let's leave it there. So I'm going to click OK for that and accept it back to my layers. So now we have that. Now that's a little bit much. So if yours is a little bit much too, then what you can try experimenting with is, again, with that layer still active in the layers panel, where it says normal here, that's where you can get to the list of blend modes. So I'm going to try different blend modes, and I just mouse over them till I see ones I like. So screen is good because that gives that a nice glow. Usually screen, soft light, or overlay are the ones I tend to like to work with. Oh, overlay is pretty nice too. Soft light, you sort of lose the glow. So I'm actually going to go with screen, I think, because that's the glowiest look. But it looks super intense still. So what I want to do is come right next to the blend mode, and now I do want to dial back the opacity. So you can either click on the word opacity and drag left, which is what I like to do, or click on this down arrow and just get a little slider. It's your choice. So I'm going to watch my image and start pulling this back a little bit. And I want to keep enough of a glow to give that glowy infrared look. I'm going to leave it there, okay? And then the only other thing you can do, well, not only, you can certainly do plenty of other things, but this area to me, which is on the grass and it almost looked like a golf course green or something, is just a little too glowy because it's detracting from the trees in my image. So again, just for a way for you to know how you can deal with it if you do get an area like that that's too glowy, bottom of the layers panel, come down to where it says this icon, the box with the circle, which is add layer mask, and you can see it's added a layer mask there. White reveals and shows everything on the layer in Photoshop, and black hides what's on that layer. So if we want to hide this area and show everything else, we have a white mask. Come down the toolbar to the brush tool, left click on that to make it active. Be sure that your black is your foreground color, and again, be sure you're painting on the mask, which has to have the white outline around it. And the black here inside my highlighter is my brush size. So I'm just going to, oh, that's a little bit intense. I'm going to do that. I'm going to lower the opacity of my brush to maybe just around close to 50%. And I'll make it a little bigger with the right bracket key. And then I'm just going to brush away some of that glow from the grassy area and just keep it on the trees. Okay. And so I'll call that good enough. And so you can see I've only brushed away that one little area. So now we've gone from the background color image to an infrared image. And again, you can do it without the glow or with the glow. It's optional if you want to add that glow. So that is the second of the part one of my video. And so in this first part of this two-part series on creative black and white looks or styles and how to achieve them in Photoshop, we've covered a minimalist look and a faux infrared look. So hopefully this will help you in achieving creative looks in your photography. So keep an eye out for part two. In part two of this set, I'll show how to create low-key and high-key black and white looks. So have fun experimenting with this process.